History and society of the Viking. When we hear the word Viking, most of us picture a bearded warrior wielding an axe, wearing a helmet and sailing in a long ship. However, the term Viking actually comes from the Old Norse word Viking, which means a person who goes on an overseas expedition or raid. It was not a name for a specific people or ethnicity, but rather a role or activity. The peoples we call Vikings lived in what is now Norway, Sweden, and Denmark. They spoke Old Norse and shared a pagan belief system that honored gods such as Odin and Thor. Rather than organized nations, these lands were made up of clans and tribes, each with their own local leaders and traditions. From their homelands, Vikings sailed west, south, and east. Swedish Vikings traveled along rivers into Eastern Europe and down to the Byzantine Empire. Norwegian and Danish Vikings voyaged to Britain, Ireland, France, and beyond, even to Iceland, Greenland, and the coast of North America. They were not only warriors, but also farmers, traders, and explorers. This versatility is what made Vikings so remarkable, combining fierce fighting skills with trade, navigation, and settlement. Viking society was divided into clear social classes. At the top were the jarls, the nobles and chieftains who owned land, led warriors, and made decisions for their communities. Below them were the karls, free men and women, including farmers, craftsmen, and merchants. Karls owned property, had legal rights, and made up the backbone of Viking society by working the land and participating in warfare. At the bottom were the thralls, slaves who were captured in raids or born into slavery. Thralls worked on farms, in households, or on ships. However, slavery was not necessarily permanent. Thralls could earn or buy their freedom. Women in Viking society had more rights than in many other medieval cultures. They could own land, request divorce, inherit property, and run households or businesses. Though Viking culture was patriarchal, women's roles were flexible and important. Most Vikings spent their days farming, fishing, and taking care of their homes rather than fighting. Their houses, called longhouses, were wooden buildings with thatched roofs and a central hearth that provided warmth and a place to cook. Their diet included barley or rye bread, fish, meat, dairy products, and vegetables. Vikings preserved food by drying, smoking, or salting it. They brewed beer and mead, kept bees, and sometimes grew fruits. Each family member had specific duties. Men handled heavy labor and warfare, while women managed the household, food storage, and child rearing. However, these roles could shift depending on circumstances. In their free time, Vikings played board games such as Hnefatafl, sang songs, told stories, and competed in contests of strength. Despite the male-dominated culture, Viking women played significant roles. The wife of a jarl might manage estates, supervise servants, and control household finances. Carrying keys on her belt symbolized her authority at home. Women could also be merchants, healers, or seers. Some sagas and archaeological findings suggest the existence of women warriors, often called shield maidens, who fought alongside men. Grave sites with female skeletons buried in full armor provide strong evidence that women sometimes took part in combat. Women had the right to divorce abusive or neglectful husbands and could reclaim their dowries. Remarriage was common and socially accepted. Though not equal by modern standards, Viking women had freedoms that were unusual for their time and place. Children were highly valued in Viking society, but from a young age, they learned responsibility. Boys began helping with farming, fishing, and animal care by the age of 7 or 8. They were taught to use weapons, navigate the wilderness, swim, and sail ships. Girls learned spinning, cooking, childcare, and sometimes trading or herbal medicine. Both boys and girls were educated mostly within the family, though some were fostered by other families to strengthen clan alliances. The The transition to adulthood came around age 15 or 16. Boys might participate in their first raid or take on more serious work, while girls could marry or manage their own households. This initiation marked their full acceptance as adults within the community. Viking life was complex and multifaceted. They were not just ruthless raiders as often portrayed in popular culture, but a society with laws, traditions, social roles, and a rich spiritual life. Their world balanced strength with order, freedom with duty, and warfare with farming and trade. It is this balance that reveals the true spirit of the Vikings: resilient, resourceful, and endlessly curious people who left a lasting impact on history. War and conquest of the Viking. Vikings were feared warriors, but their success was not just due to brute strength, it was also about skill, strategy, and effective weaponry. Their primary weapons included the sword, axe, spear, and shield. The sword was highly prized, often beautifully decorated, and passed down through generations. Viking swords were typically double-edged, designed for slashing and thrusting. However, swords were expensive, and not every Viking could afford one. More common was the axe, which came in various sizes, from small hand axes to massive battle axes. Axes were versatile tools, useful both in combat and daily life, making them the weapon of choice for many warriors. Spears were widely used for throwing and thrusting, often carried in large numbers by Viking troops. Their length and versatility made them effective in both close combat and from a distance. Shields were round and made of wood, often reinforced with iron rims or bosses. Shields were essential not only for defense, but also for forming shield walls, a tight formation that protected warriors from arrows and blows. Vikings excelled in fast, coordinated attacks. Their war tactics combined speed, surprise, and flexibility. They could disembark quickly from ships, launch raids on settlements or monasteries, and retreat before local forces could respond. Mobility and aggression were their greatest assets. The Viking Age began in 793 AD with the infamous raid on the monastery of Lindisfarne off the coast of England. This attack shocked Christian Europe. The monastery was wealthy and poorly defended, making it an ideal target. Over the following decades, Vikings launched numerous raids across the British Isles and continental Europe. In Ireland, they attacked monasteries and towns, sometimes settling and founding cities like Dublin. They also targeted Paris several times in the 9th century. The Vikings sailed up the Seine River, besieging the city multiple times. Their persistence eventually forced the Frankish king to negotiate and pay tribute. In Britain, Vikings settled large areas, especially in the north and east. The term Danelaw refers to regions under Danish Viking control, where their laws and customs dominated. These raids combined plunder, intimidation, and political conquest. But Vikings were also traders and settlers, turning some of their temporary raids into permanent colonies. Several battles during the Viking Age had a decisive impact on history. The Battle of Edington, 878 AD, was a turning point in England. The Viking leader Guthrum led the great heathen army to conquer much of the Anglo-Saxon kingdom. However, King Alfred the Great of Wessex defeated Guthrum's forces, forcing him to convert to Christianity and agree to peace terms. This victory preserved Anglo-Saxon independence and marked the beginning of Viking settlement integration. Another major battle was the Battle of Stamford Bridge, 1066, where the English king Harold Godwinson defeated the Norwegian king Harald Hardrada. This battle ended Viking attempts to conquer England, but came just before the Norman invasion, which changed English history forever. The Siege of Paris occurred in 845 AD, when Viking raiders, led by Ragnar Lodbrok, sailed up the Seine and demanded a huge ransom to leave. This event illustrated Viking boldness and the vulnerability of even major cities to their attacks. These battles reflect the ebb and flow of Viking power, at times devastating and unstoppable, at others repelled and absorbed by local kingdoms. Not all Vikings were raiders. Many found employment as elite mercenaries. One of the most famous Viking roles was service in the Varangian Guard, the personal bodyguards of the Byzantine emperors. These warriors, primarily from Sweden and Norway, traveled east via rivers and trade routes to Constantinople, modern Istanbul. The Varangians were renowned for their fierce loyalty and combat skills, often wielding large axes. Serving as mercenaries offered Vikings wealth, status, and access to luxury goods unavailable at home. It also connected the Viking world with the wider medieval world, from Europe to the Middle East. The Varangian Guard existed for centuries, a testament to the Vikings' adaptability and martial reputation beyond their homelands. Viking success depended heavily on their mastery of the seas. Their longships were revolutionary, fast, light, and able to navigate both open ocean and shallow rivers. Vikings used their ships to launch surprise attacks along coasts, rivers, and estuaries. Their ability to strike quickly and disappear made them elusive foes. They targeted undefended villages, monasteries, and trading centers, seeking loot and captives. This style of warfare was essentially piracy, but on a grand scale. Unlike later naval battles, Viking raids rarely involved large-scale fleet engagements. Instead, the focus was on speed, agility, and terror. Ships could carry dozens of warriors, allowing Vikings to spread out over wide areas or concentrate forces for a sudden assault. Their ships were also used to transport goods, settlers, and warriors across vast distances, enabling them to establish far-flung colonies. The Vikings were far more than ruthless marauders. They were skilled warriors with advanced military tactics, weaponry, and naval technology. Their raids reshaped Europe's political landscape and opened new trade routes. Battles like Edington and Stamford Bridge marked the end of Viking dominance in some regions, but their legacy persisted in settlements, culture, and even military traditions like the Varangian Guard. Their strategy of swift, mobile attacks from the sea made them formidable opponents and allowed a relatively small population to have an outsized impact on medieval Europe. Explorers and colonists of the Vikings. The Vikings were extraordinary explorers, pushing the limits of their world far beyond Scandinavia. One of their most famous achievements was their westward expansion into the North Atlantic. Around the late 9th century, Norse sailors discovered and settled Iceland. This volcanic island became a thriving community where Vikings established farms, built longhouses, and created a unique society governed by assemblies called things. Iceland's isolation helped preserve many Viking traditions, sagas, and culture. From Iceland, the Vikings voyaged further west to Greenland around 985 AD, led by Eric the Red. Greenland offered new opportunities for farming, hunting, and trade, though its harsher climate made survival challenging. The most remarkable western voyage was to Vinland, a land believed to be part of modern-day North America. Around the year 1000, Leif Erikson and other explorers reached the coast of what is now Newfoundland, Canada. Archaeological evidence, such as the Norse site at Lens aux Meadows, confirms that Vikings were the first Europeans to set foot in the Americas, nearly 500 years before Columbus. These journeys showed the Vikings' exceptional navigation skills, courage, and desire to explore new frontiers. While some Vikings sailed west, others traveled east along the rivers of Eastern Europe. These Vikings, often called the Varangians or Rus, navigated the waterways connecting the Baltic Sea to the Black Sea and Caspian Sea. They established trade routes that linked northern Europe with the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic Caliphates. Along these routes, they traded furs, amber, slaves, and weapons for silk, spices, silver, and other luxury goods. According to some accounts, the Rus princes founded the city of Kiev, which became a powerful center of culture and trade. The Eastern Viking routes were vital for connecting different civilizations and facilitating the exchange of goods, ideas, and technologies. Vikings were not only raiders and explorers, but also settlers and city builders. In Ireland, the Vikings founded Dublin around 841 AD. Originally a fortified trading post and raiding base, Dublin quickly grew into a major economic hub. Viking Dublin thrived on trade and craft production, influencing Irish society deeply. In England, the Vikings established the city of Jorvik, known today as York. It became the capital of the Danelaw and one of the largest and wealthiest cities in medieval England. Archaeological excavations in York have uncovered Viking houses, workshops, and artifacts, providing rich insights into urban Viking life. Further south, Vikings conquered and settled in northern France, an area that came to be known as Normandy, land of the Northmen. The Viking leader Rollo was granted this territory by the French king in exchange for loyalty and defense against other raiders. Normandy later became a powerful duchy and played a crucial role in European history, including the Norman conquest of England in 1066. The Viking Age left a lasting mark on many cultures. The influence of the Vikings can be seen in language, law, art, and religion across Europe. Linguistically, many Old Norse words entered English, Irish, Scottish, and French languages. Words related to everyday life, like window, knife, sky, and law, have Viking roots. Culturally, Vikings influenced local art styles, especially through their intricate metalwork, wood carving, and jewelry designs. They also introduced new building techniques and ship designs. Religiously, while Vikings originally practiced Norse paganism, their contact with Christian Europe led to conversion and cultural exchange. Many Viking settlers eventually adopted Christianity, blending old and new beliefs. Their settlements became melting pots of ideas, customs, and traditions, enriching the medieval world. The Vikings were more than fierce warriors. They were visionary explorers, skilled traders, and founders of lasting communities. Their journeys west to Iceland, Greenland, and Vinland expanded the known world. Their eastern voyages connected Europe with Byzantium and beyond. Through their cities and settlements, Vikings shaped the political and cultural landscapes of many regions. The Viking legacy is evident in language, law, art, and religion, showing how this dynamic people influenced and integrated with the diverse societies they encountered. Viking culture and beliefs. The religion of the Vikings was deeply rooted in Norse paganism, a complex system of beliefs centered around gods, nature spirits, and the cycles of life and death. Unlike the monotheistic religions of later medieval Europe, Viking faith was polytheistic, meaning they worshipped many gods, each overseeing different aspects of the world. Viking religious practice included various rituals and sacrifices aimed at securing favor from the gods. These offerings ranged from simple gifts of food or drink to more dramatic animal sacrifices and, in some cases, human sacrifices. Sacred groves, stone altars, and burial mounds served as places of worship. The Vikings believed the gods controlled the forces of nature and fate. They sought divine protection in daily life, battles, and voyages. Rituals often involved seers or volvas, women who acted as spiritual guides and foretellers of the future, communicating with the gods through trance and magic. Religious ceremonies were community events, combining faith with social cohesion, where stories, prayers, and songs reinforced the shared values of bravery, honor, and loyalty. Norse mythology is rich with fascinating gods and epic tales. At the center was Odin, the All-Father and god of wisdom, war, and death. Odin was often depicted as a one-eyed, long-bearded figure who sacrificed one eye in exchange for knowledge. He ruled over Valhalla, the hall where fallen warriors chosen by the Valkyrie would feast and prepare for the final battle. Thor, Odin's son, was the god of thunder, strength, and protection. Wielding his magical hammer Mjolnir, Thor defended gods and humans against giants and chaos. His tales emphasize courage, loyalty, and the natural power of storms. Freyja was a powerful goddess associated with love, fertility, and war. She could influence battles and received half of the slain warriors, while Odin took the other half. One of the most famous myths is Ragnarok, the end of the world prophecy. It tells of a great battle where gods and monsters fight, leading to the destruction and rebirth of the cosmos. Though terrifying, Ragnarok also symbolizes renewal and hope. These myths shaped the Viking worldview, giving meaning to life's struggles and inspiring courage in the face of death. While Vikings are often thought of as illiterate warriors, they actually used a unique writing system called runes. The runic alphabet, known as the Futhark, consisted of angular letters carved into wood, stone, or metal. Runes were used for inscriptions on weapons, memorial stones, and everyday objects. These inscriptions could record names, commemorate the dead, or mark ownership. Runes also had a magical significance. Vikings believed the symbols carried power and could protect the bearer or curse enemies. Some runes were carved into amulets or weapons as charms. The famous rune stones scattered across Scandinavia provide valuable historical information about Viking journeys, battles, and families. They combine art, writing, and spirituality in stone. The runic tradition connects the Vikings to their ancestors and the mysterious forces they worshipped. Much of what we know about Viking culture comes from the sagas, epic stories passed down orally before being written down in medieval Iceland. These sagas blend history, myth, and legend, recounting the lives of heroes, kings, explorers, and gods. They reflect Viking values such as honor, bravery, loyalty, and family ties. Skalds were poets and storytellers who composed and recited complex verses praising chieftains, recounting battles, and preserving history. Their poetry was characterized by intricate metaphors and kennings, poetic expressions like whale road for the sea. The oral tradition was essential in Viking society, where literacy was limited, but storytelling was a powerful tool to educate, entertain, and unite communities. Sagas and skaldic poems give us insight into the Viking spirit, their adventures, beliefs, and struggles. Viking culture was a rich tapestry woven from myth, ritual, art, and storytelling. Their religion celebrated a pantheon of gods whose stories explained the mysteries of the world and gave meaning to life and death. Through runes, they combined practical communication with spiritual magic. Through sagas and poetry, they preserved their history and ideals for future generations. This blend of belief and culture shaped the Vikings not just as warriors and explorers, but as a people deeply connected to their past, their gods, and each other. Sea and trade of the Viking. Viking success and influence were largely due to their mastery of the sea. Their ships were technological marvels, designed for speed, flexibility, and versatility. The most famous type was the longship, a sleek, narrow vessel powered by both sails and oars. Longships were built with overlapping wooden planks called clinker-built construction, making them light yet strong enough to withstand rough seas. These ships could travel vast distances from the icy North Atlantic to the Mediterranean Sea, demonstrating exceptional seaworthiness. Among these, the drakar, meaning dragon ship, stood out. Drakars were decorated with carved dragon heads or other fierce motifs on their prows, meant to intimidate enemies and protect sailors from evil spirits. The shallow draft of Viking ships allowed them to navigate both open ocean and shallow rivers. This flexibility enabled Vikings to raid inland settlements, trade deep within Europe, and explore new lands. Navigation was sophisticated. Vikings used the sun, stars, landmarks, ocean currents, and even the flight of birds to guide their journeys. Some historians believe they may have used sunstones, a type of crystal that can detect the sun's position even on cloudy days, although this is debated. Their shipbuilding and navigational skills were unmatched at the time, enabling them to become the preeminent seafarers of medieval Europe. Viking trade was as important as their raids. Their ships connected vast networks of exchange spanning Europe, Asia, and even the Middle East. Key trade routes included rivers like the Volga and Dnieper, linking Scandinavia to the Byzantine Empire and the Islamic world. The Baltic Sea was another major trading hub. The Vikings traded a wide variety of goods. Furs and animal pelts from the northern forests were highly prized in southern markets. Amber, often called the gold of the north, was a valuable export. Slaves, sadly, were also part of the Viking economy, captured during raids and sold across Europe and Asia. Weapons, tools, and jewelry crafted by Viking artisans were traded or gifted. From the south and east, Vikings brought back silks, spices, silver coins, glassware, and wine, goods unavailable in Scandinavia but coveted by the elite. Viking towns like Birka, Hedeby, and Dublin became bustling trading centers, attracting merchants from many cultures. Trade brought wealth and new ideas, influencing Viking society. Contact with other cultures led to technological innovations, artistic styles, and even changes in social and political structures. The Vikings were not just warriors and explorers, they were also skilled merchants and diplomats who helped integrate Northern Europe into wider economic networks. Viking mastery of the sea and trade routes was key to their widespread influence. Their advanced shipbuilding and navigation allowed them to explore, raid, settle, and trade across vast regions. By connecting the north with the south, east, and west, Vikings opened channels for goods, culture, and ideas that shaped medieval Europe. Their legacy lives on in the ships they built, the cities they founded, and the trade networks they forged, reminders of a people who truly ruled the waves. The Vikings were a remarkable people whose impact on history goes far beyond their reputation as fierce warriors and raiders. Through their rich and complex history and society, they built communities with unique social structures and cultural values, where family, honor, and loyalty played central roles. The vital role of women, the upbringing of children, and their daily lives reveal a society both pragmatic and vibrant. In war and conquest, Vikings demonstrated advanced military tactics, skillful use of weapons, and bold strategies that allowed them to launch far-reaching raids and establish themselves as formidable forces across Europe. Their service as mercenaries and their mastery of sea warfare expanded their influence even further. As explorers and colonists, Vikings ventured into unknown lands, from the icy coasts of Greenland and Iceland to the shores of North America. They established important cities and trade centers that became melting pots of culture and power. Their eastern expeditions connected Scandinavia with the Byzantine Empire and beyond, forging extensive trade networks. The Vikings' culture and beliefs were rich and deeply symbolic. Their mythology, rituals, and oral traditions shaped their worldview and inspired generations. The runic alphabet and sagas preserved their history, myths, and values in ways that continue to captivate us today. Finally, their mastery of sea and trade was crucial to their success. Their innovative shipbuilding and expert navigation enabled long voyages and flexible warfare, while their vibrant trading networks linked diverse peoples and economies across continents. Together, these facets paint a picture of the Vikings as explorers, traders, warriors, and storytellers, a people whose legacy helped shape medieval Europe and whose influence resonates in modern culture and history.